Record. Okay, so at the moment it's just me and you, Brian, but however, there's a couple of people that requested this. I'm hoping that they might join us shortly.
It's all about quality, not quantity sometimes, Sam.
Indeed. So I called this changing our minds, not our mindset, because I think it's a part of leadership. We can change our minds if we're given enough evidence to challenge what we might have previously held dear. I think it's actually a good thing to change our minds. But I don't think we should be changing our mindset. So that's kind of the theme for today. And I want to acknowledge two books that I both found very useful in this the journey. The first one is the bottom one is a book called Mindfulness, which the 25th year anniversary came out just recently. So, but that's Dr. Ellen Langer out of Harvard, who's a famous lady in the area of mindfulness. And then secondly, the book Mindset, which I think first came out about 10 years ago, but it's become very popular of recent times. So relying heavily on the work of those two wonderful women. And this is what they say, and we'll have a look at each one of these. Ellen Langer, firstly, she says, life consists only of moments, nothing more than that. So if you make the moment matter, it all matters. So what do you think, Brian?
Well, you're right. You're in a moment every moment of the day, aren't you? So I know in a school situation, every 30 seconds you're doing something really different, and the moment you're in whatever mind matter you're focusing on can make a huge result to your outcome. Whether you're having a bad morning and you've got to turn it around, the next time you open a door or the next interview or something, it's certainly the moment.
Yeah,
and all the Olympic people when they're lining up for a throw, that's their moment. All their training, whatever happens before then,
Yeah, I've always thought of moments about 90 seconds, so it's not long.
Yeah.
And I think they swim the 100 metres in the pool in about half that.
Yeah.
so it's a blink of an eye, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is.
And then the other side of this is Carol Dweck. She says we like to think of our champions and idols as superheroes who are born different from us. We don't think of them as relatively ordinary people who made themselves extraordinary. And when I was thinking about that, I looked up some folklore, and these were some of my favourites. Beethoven's teacher thought he was a hopeless composer.
Wow.
Leo Tolstoy, he of War and Peace fame, was unable and unwilling to learn. Walt Disney was told he lacked creative imagination. J.K. Rowling was told her story would never sell. And Michael Jordan was the last one I picked out of. There's thousands of these around, but Michael Jordan's coach said he was no more talented than anyone else.
Sometimes that's just a spark people need to fire back, don't they?
Yes, indeed. So
you can get it wrong.
You can get it wrong, and so often the so-called experts, have got it wrong. And what could be traced to all of those people, though, is in using Carol Dweck's model, is they had a growth mindset. So on the left is the fixed mindset, and using this is her table from her book. I can't grow my brain. I want to be the best. I do well, etc. What she says is a growth mindset is I can grow my brain. I want to get better. My hard work brings me success. Mistakes help me learn. I check my comments. They give me the next steps. I love trying new and hard things. And I try different strategies and never giving up. So that's what she calls the growth mindset. And I think all of those people on that previous slide, you could say they all possess that.
And it's all about turning a negative into a positive.
In many ways it is, but it goes back that, you don't have to be a famous person. it's
Right.
about, as Alan Langer says, it's about making the moment matter.
Yeah, it's true. Mm.
And so I think mindfulness is kind of where it starts for me. I mean, I think you've got to be mindful in order to have a mindset. That would be my take on this. And according to Dr. Langer, she says mindfulness is the process of actively noticing things. And when you do that, it puts you in the present, which makes you more sensitive to context and perspective. And it's the essence, of engagement. Just an incredible thing. You know, my wife and I took our dog out in the car this morning down to the scrub, and we did our daily walk and came back, and then I went out again about an hour later, and I noticed two things that I didn't notice before that I'm sure were there before. So we often look but don't see.
Yep.
And these days, you see, if you go for a walk down any street, you've got to be careful to avoid people who are not looking because they're looking at their phones.
Yes. Yeah, I was reading. There's a Smiling Mind app. I don't know whether you've seen that. It's by Dr. Richard Chambers, and kids are using it at school a lot, or teachers are using it, and adults are using it. And you get, it's a free app, and you put your things in, and then it goes through a lot of this kind of mindfulness and things like that. And basically, it's a process of what is actually happening at the moment.
Yes.
Like you're saying.
Yes.
You could go for a walk, but when you go for a walk, you want to look at the person's face. You want to see actually what type of bird it is that's in front of you, or, all these, there's so many things to see in that moment that you can just let them go past you without realizing. And by focusing in that moment, you just, you gain so much more out of it.
Yeah, indeed. And I think equally,
or whether you're working or whatever.
Yeah, and I think equally, it's okay to have a mindless walk as well.
No, absolutely, yes.
But I think it's noticing and deciding, which one you're in. I found it interesting. I read the book Deep Work, which we'll touch on a bit later. But I found it interesting. One of the recommendations is, really focus on one thing and spend a few hours just on that. And it's interesting how the mind can wander, and
for sure,
training ourselves to just really focus on something. But I have found that when I do engage in deep work, and my longest stretch so far is about 90 minutes. According to the Cal Newport, the author of Deep Work, you should be able to go for about 4 hours. I haven't quite made 4 hours, but I do regularly just stay with one thing for 90 minutes, and I find it very productive. But I think what Dr. Langer is saying here is that if you are noticing,
and it's like it's something you need to practice.
Yes, which is why meditation is a useful thing for both mindfulness and mindset. Just lost you temporarily there, Brian.
Yes, you did. No, it's all right.
So, yeah, we might have had a bit of a glitch in the internet there, but I was just saying that I think that's why meditation is both a good tool for mindfulness and mindset, because it teaches you about focusing in the moment. And I know when I first learned meditation a long time ago, I found it very hard just to do that. In my case, I use breath meditation. It takes a lot of work, I found, if you're used to letting the mind wander or paying attention to what your mind is thinking. It takes a lot of discipline to just quiet the mind. But the practice, whether it's breath meditation or another form of meditation, teaches us mindfulness, and that, in my opinion, helps us with our mindset. What do you think, Brian?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I have to really concentrate on how I'm breathing, because I used to breathe in and out of my mouth all the time from having a broken nose playing football.
Right.
And I create nodules and things. As being a teacher, it was stressing, and I was football coaching, and I was wondering what was going on. So I had it checked out, and they said, it's the way you're breathing. You just got to breathe it through your nose, out your mouth, all that type of thing. So it takes a lot of practice. I'm good at it some days, and other days I forget. So you've got to be in that mindset to make sure that you're doing that skill that you're required.
Yeah, which raised an interesting thing that, like all skills, you got to keep working at them in order to master them. And I think what I found interesting is this idea. This is from Dr. Jill Taylor, who's a world leader in neuroscience. She says most of us think about ourselves as thinking creatures who feel, but we're actually feeling creatures who think. And we live in a society that values what we think over what we feel. And I think that's interesting when you think about mindfulness, you think about mindset. We do live in a world where it's the focus is on what we think, but the real nature of things I find is in what we feel. I find it interesting when I'm involved in meetings, which is often, and I often get asked, what do I think? No pun intended. And I often use that moment to say, I'm more interested in the question, what are you feeling? Or what do you feel?
Yeah, that's a good point. Mm.
And I find it more valuable to say to people, when you're having a conversation with someone, it's more empowering for everyone to say, I feel, than it is to say, I think.
Well, that's right. I've found in a lot of meetings, when you're discussing different avenues or different projects and things like that, you really have to talk about how you feel about it.
Yes.
Because that gives everyone an idea where you're coming from. And sometimes people feel differently to what they think, and they let you know what they think more than how they feel, and it becomes a shambles.
It does. And so I think a key here is a key to mindfulness and mindset and meditation is it's about feeling before thinking. And which helps with this whole business of life, which is about getting from here to there. And as you and I have talked about, and we've talked about it a lot in previous sessions, that, stress is caused by being here and wanting to be there. And so we help reduce that by focusing on quantum leaps, as in the true science of a quantum leap. So it's not a big jump, but rather it's a direct jump from here to there. And so appreciative leaders are actually experts at taking quantum leaps. And I find that mindset and being mindful are keys to making sure that the leap that we're about to take, that small shift that we're about to take, that we've actually thought it through, that we've really got in touch with how we're feeling about it before we actually make the leap. And so it goes right back to Shakespeare, in fact, Brian, which of course is the theme of is really the underlying theme of the Appreciative Leader Handbook. So it turns out that to be or not to be really is the question.
Yeah, that's a good get, that one. Well done, Anne.
And of course, there's really only one answer: to thine own self be true. And often that is hard because we're thinking of things in a bigger sphere, or we're thinking about things in a lifespan, or we're thinking about things in a year, a month, a week, or whatever, which is how common most things are. But mindfulness and mindset both suggest it's actually moment by moment. So if I'm not being true to myself in this moment, the good news is I can correct it in the next one.
Yeah.
So in the blink of an eye, I can change it, which is why, I sort of call this, we can change our minds, but not our mindset.
Yep.
And so if I mess up this moment, I don't need to, because that's just a blink of an eye, not 90 seconds.
That's it.
I can do better in the next moment.
We had it was probably a conference type thing with a few of our Lucan school leaders, maybe last year before, by a guy called Dr. Adam Fraser. Have you heard about Dr. Adam Fraser?
Yes, I've seen him a couple of times. Good guy.
Yeah, he's a good guy, and he talks all about the third space and how you show up. It's how you show up. Like, this is about moment. I'm trying to relate this to moment by moment.
Yes.
You're having a meeting or something, you finish that meeting, you walk out that door for the next opportunity, and you're going into a next meeting. So it's how you're going to show up. You forget about where you've been, you move on to the next moment. And so you always ask yourself, how am I going to show up?
Yeah, and I like the concept of third space. I mean, it's the same. Covey call it the third alternative.
All right, yes.
The Buddhists call it the middle way. Of course, I call it shared view.
Yes.
So it's the same, exactly the same principle. And so I find this it's fascinating itself. A lot of people these days, when I meet people, they want to meet in a coffee shop.
As we did initially.
Indeed. And that's the third space. So, first space, home; second place, work; third place or space, a coffee shop.
Yes.
But it's interesting I was having this conversation just on Friday with a bunch of people as we went into a meeting where there was a fair bit of stress prior to the meeting. And we had this conversation around, well, okay, what we're actually entering is a third space. So it's not, my world, not your world. It's actually a world that we're going to create when we go in there, which changes the dynamics. And I often say to people, you can leave your cares out there. You can pick them up on the way out if you want. But in here, the focus is on finding, our way, which is in the shared view
because prior
concept.
Moments don't really make any difference to that moment at the time, does it?
No, right. Which is why the Buddhists call it the middle way, because obviously in their language, it's all about, the meaning and behind the suffering. And so it's interesting how, these are the kind of universal principles that don't change. It's a matter of how do we apply the principles in our own best way. And one of the ways I think is to understand the difference between prayer and meditation. Because prayer is common in most of the religions. Meditation is common in some religions, although these days, from what I can tell, meditation is becoming more common across the board in religions. But there was an interesting take I came across years ago where it says prayer is asking, meditation is listening. What's your take on that, Brian?
Well, obviously, Chris and myself, we do pray a lot, but it's funny with meditation. You think years ago it was something from left field. What are they doing? But meditation is about listening, and you do that all the time. And you're listening to people, or you're listening to different books or people talking or what situations, and it's amazing how widespread meditation is. It's not some weird little thing. It's actually quite enthralling to be able to listen for hours or listen for 2 minutes or.
Yeah, and to me, it's why it's a key to mindfulness and mindset, because it is this attitude of listening and just paying attention. Often, a practice that I help a lot of clients with is using silence in meetings. So often at the beginning of a meeting, we'll have 2 or 3 minutes silence. And a lot of people find it uncomfortable originally.
It's interesting. Sorry, Ed.
You're creating an atmosphere.
Absolutely. Like, when we do the minute silence for Anzac Day, for example.
Yes.
You talk to the students after it and the teachers. You don't think of nothing in that minute. There's so many, it's like a movie running through your head of, maybe your family's experienced war, or you knew someone, or you read books. You're just thinking about all these different moments in that time.
Yeah, well, that's why part of the reason why I find it useful to say let's not have a minute's silence. Let's have 2 or 3 minutes silence. I'll let you know when the time's up, but just become mindful. Start to notice. And what I've found is that meetings become much more powerful. People become much more respectful. There's a lot more listening and a lot less talking. And I sometimes will introduce the talking stick concept to meetings as a way of really, if you haven't got the stick, you're not allowed to talk.
Yeah, it works well.
And whatever the symbolism or ritual might be, but it does just help this whole process of being more mindful, which of course comes from having the right mindset. And in terms of meditation, I listen to a lot of podcasts from the Tim Ferriss show. And what I saw, it was this interesting statistic recently that 80% of his guests on the 150 million plus downloaded of his podcast regularly meditate in some way.
Wow.
So I just found that an interesting statistic.
That's high.
Certainly I'm coming across more and more business people who have some form of meditation as not only a way of relaxing, but a way of staying mindful. So, Brian, because there's only 2 of us, it's a short and sharp session, but what goals might you have that would take you out of your comfort zone as a next quantum leap for you?
Look, I think having time for yourself, or making time for yourself, is really, really important. I don't know whether you've heard of a guy called Robin Sharma. He's an American guy.
The monk who sold his Ferrari.
Yeah, the 5 a.m. club type thing, like he gets up at 5, he exercises, he reads, he does everything else by the time he does his day. And I was doing that for a little while, and it actually worked really well. But one of my goals now is to do something similar, but get it into a really big habit. I write a lot of things in diaries now, so I can track what I'm doing and whether I'm doing it regularly or things like that. So,
yeah, well, that sounds like a good plan. I remember what you're really saying is to be more deliberate.
Yes. Yep.
That's it. Which is another word for being mindful, isn't it?
Yep. It is, absolutely.
Yes.
And
that's part of this. I read a book recently called The Talent Code, which it didn't make my top 21 books that are pictured there, but it did make my recommended reading list. But that was about deep practice, or sometimes called deliberate practice. It was about ignition, or what motivates us or what drives us, and it was about getting other people to help us through coaching. I've circled the Deep Work book there, and when I put this recording up on the community site, I'll put the various links in. But Deep Work, I found, was a very interesting way to get into the deep practice, or deliberate practice, or deep work, whatever you want to call it. Was a great way to become more mindful of things. So that might be a useful book for you to get hold of, Brian.
Yeah, absolutely. Who was that by again?
Deep Works by Cal Newport.
So what's on your agenda then for deliberate practice coming up? Or
Look, I think it's. I'm at the stage of my life where I guess I'm getting more used to doing nothing.
I'm starting to enjoy that time too.
And it's not because I'm retired or like you or that I don't want to do work. It's just that I'm finding it more valuable just to sit and not necessarily be. It's really the opposite of mindful. It's mindless in some ways. I am in the habit of sitting under a tree on a regular basis and not doing much, because I find when you leave those spaces, even if it's just for a few minutes, that you often see the world in a different way. So I think it's probably one of these both and things, that the more you're mindless, the better you are when you're mindful, if that makes sense.
Well, when you're mindless, it frees up your mind, I think.
Yeah, so it's just not particularly when I'm during the week or at times when I don't have clients, I'll find something to do. I'll go and create something or read something or whatever. And part of one of my goals is in those moments to not do anything, to just take the time to. I do. I
think the busier you are, the less opportunities you do to take that, I think. And that's something, when I look back now, I valued those little times where I just had 5 minutes, just walked out in the schoolyard or walked down the street or whatever. And you must do it, I think. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, so, and I think it creates a harmony. I think if you're doing one thing, you don't necessarily have a harmony with the opposite. And like all of life, we need both this and that.
Yeah, absolutely.
To make it work. I was interested in this comment from Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, as another way of sort of looking at all this.
Yes.
It's all part of learning, isn't it?
You never know everything. So, that's a great quote,
That was based on what he saw as the value of the mindset book that we began this, from Carol Dweck earlier, and I thought it was an interesting takeaway. So this one to me covers it very well as well.
To wash the dishes.
It's another way of, Jim Rowan's line of wherever you are, be there. This is another way of saying that. A lot of people wash the dishes and they're thinking about other things.
Yes.
Whereas what this guy's saying is just wash the dishes.
Just focus on what you're doing at that moment.
If you're chopping the wood, chop the wood.
Yes. Yeah, that's it. That's good.
And that's another angle into mindset.
And when you're doing that, like when you're washing the dishes, you're not worrying about what you're going to do tomorrow, whether you got your tax in on time or whatever. You take a break from all that, and you just enjoy.
And these are all good things to practice mindfulness.
Yes.
And therefore maintain a growth mindset. So just before we go, we always end with, do your work. That's the process. When I put the slides up, you'll see there's regular things happening, and you'll see more about this when I put this up in the program. Next time, we're going to be looking at one aspect of remarkabilisation. We've looked at a couple of these, and I'd be interested, Brian, if you can read that, whether or not we've done some good work on candid communications. I was thinking that maybe next time we would talk more about shared view, because there hasn't been an accelerator specifically on shared view, but right. I'll put that out and about and
that'd be good.
See what people do next time. And before you go, Brian, I'll just stop the recording for now.
Yes.
And